Welcome to Charts Today, and today Charts Today comes to you from eWorld in Essen, probably the biggest energy show in the world. And I'm here with my new partner, Trevor Neal. We've known each other probably, 30 years, Trevor?
Indeed it is, probably 30 plus.
Yeah, and I'm here with my Beta hat on because I've joined Beta Group. Happy to join Trevor doing a training. I think it's going to be great for us to jointly train people together.
I do indeed, and it will be a great team together, and I couldn't be more happy than to be working with David, my old friend. But he's introduced this new dress code, and I'm not too sure about that yet.
Well, it's fun to be here, and we'll get down to looking at some charts now, but I thought I'd just share with you, we're going to focus on energy markets today.
Okay, so I'm back in my hotel room, and we are going to look at mostly energy today, given it's eWorld, but I do want to just look at a few things before we do. And first of all, the dollar, we're just really waiting. This is the daily chart and the 60-minute chart, medium term and short term view. This is where we're thinking weeks ahead. This is where we're thinking days ahead. I'm just really waiting for this upside target to activate. We need to move through 107 to do that, and that would then turn this target green, and then it would move from this point. So we see we do have an upside target on the short-term chart, but we are deteriorating away at the moment. We've got a cross above the cloud. We're still pretty bullish on the dollar. We're just crossing the cloud there on the daily, so really quite key. Looking at Bitcoin, we're seeing some quite big moves here. The longer-term targets in trade, 62,000, 66,300, but interestingly, had these shorter term targets given. The dots are where the targets were given. That's a new feature in Updater. Dots where the targets were given. We've got a new downside target not yet activated. A move to a new low below 51,300 would activate that downside target back to 48,600. So that's really what we're just going to watch for the moment. A bit of volatility kicking in there after this big run in Bitcoin. The Nasdaq looking really quite interesting at the moment. All eyes are on Nvidia. We do have this upside target in train on the medium term chart, where we did have a downward thrust and then a move lower. So this is a lower high, lower low. There's the dot where the target was given yesterday, and we are seeing now this downside target some 5% lower, and really all eyes are on Nvidia. They will announce results after hours today, so it will be tomorrow that we actually see what the reaction in the market is. But it was down 4% yesterday. A lot of nerves pre-results, price just going through the cloud there, so no real heads up yet as to what's going to happen there, but if we do move lower, we will potentially see a thrust target, and so that's going to be really quite interesting to watch. So all eyes on Nvidia, and that's really what the market's looking at just generally. Now we said we're going to focus on the energy mix because we're at eWorld, so let's start with Brent crude first of all, and we see here a very interesting picture with Brent crude. We are crossing the cloud on the daily, so we are just moving through on the price, not yet through on the lagging line. This downside target was in train, but these new upside targets are taking hold. An upside target that's been activated, plus a new one that we're waiting for. So it was that thrust there, produced that target. Then we had another thrust where we haven't moved higher than the thrust point, but that's pointing to $100, back to the levels that we saw at the end of 2022. And we did get close last September. We do have these upside targets and move above the cloud. So crude oil starting to look a little bit more interesting on the daily chart. And if we look at the 60-minute chart, that's playing through as well. We saw this upside target given on the 5th of February, given and met. An upward thrust here and a new upside target there. But we do have a little mini downside target. We have got quite a tight range on crude oil. So it's really a case of this 80, 83, 60 range that we've really got to watch for the break, and that will then give us a heads up as to which target. But for the moment, we are quite range bound on crude, so that's something that we do need to be aware of. So if we look at US nat gas, that's another one that's been pretty interesting. Gas markets, of course, have had a really tough time in the last few weeks, and we just see here that on the longer term daily chart, this medium term targets where we're thinking weeks ahead, we've got this target to 97. Now I know that people really struggle with that concept, but that's where we're seeing the targets pointing to. we did see these upside targets given and met. We've now got these downside targets. It's happening a little bit more quickly on nat gas, so we can actually adjust the factor there. But really, we are seeing these big moves down. We've got targets to 160 that were met. They were given much, much higher. So we really just cannot ignore the target. So still a pretty bearish picture. But on the 60-minute chart, we are seeing a little bit of recovery. We're through the cloud. So that downtrend on the 60-minute chart is broken. We've got a new upside target. So it looks like for the moment we're seeing some respite for US nat gas, and that does potentially mean that we will move higher. So really quite key there. Looking at coal, this one again quite interesting. We've got downside targets there on the daily chart in coal. 67.60 was given at 110. Very hard to believe at the time, but we're at 90. And if we look at these downside targets here on coal, we see it's all downside targets below the cloud. So still pretty bearish. Downside target 83.93 that was given at 102. We are now sitting, not a long way from that target. So you really can't ignore it. And we're not seeing any upside thrust targets at the moment for coal. Now, we are seeing some respite. Carbon emissions had a pretty bad start to the week, down 7% on Monday. And that is pushing us towards this target. If we look at the daily, these are all the targets that were given, where all the dots are. And we can see here, every time we've had a recovery in the price, that's just set us up for another new downward thrust in price. So we really can't ignore that. 44.72 is the target. That's the one that's in train at the moment. All the other targets have been met. So it's not looking great on the medium-term chart for emissions. If we look at the 60-minute chart, the shorter-term chart, we do have a little new upside target, not yet activated. That will turn from orange to green if it is activated. And of course, if you're trading emissions in the very short term, look at the 1-minute chart. And we do see for today, we've got some upside targets. So it does look like we'll have a better day for carbon emissions today, but you really do need to watch. If you're trading carbon, you need to watch those 1-minute charts, really quite key. And this downside target was actually met. So we are just waiting to see new targets generated there, but go to the 1 minute. That's where you're going to see what's really going on. And if we look at the UK future, this has now got more and more liquid as well. Really quite interesting there, seeing the picture there, downside targets, this new upside target. Notice how the liquidity has really kicked in recent months for the UK carbon future. And we are just waiting for that upside target to be activated as well on the daily chart. We look here on the 60-minute chart. We really see now that liquidity is really pretty good. And we've got a mixed picture here. So fairly neutral there with those mixed targets. But again, you could look at the 1-minute chart and you'll see here we've got upside targets for today. This was yesterday's trading, giving these price targets to the upside. So it does look better for today. And again, if you're trading carbon, you need to be watching those targets. Looking at US nat gas, TTF gas, has really been falling quite heavily there. We see the daily targets there, the target given at 30 to 22.92. We've pretty much got there. 23.29 is where we got to as the low there. Again, we've got a little bit of a mixed picture there on the daily chart, so gas looking a little bit better. And again, look to your 1 minute upside target there for today. So that's given the first thing this morning on this jump. So that's looking a little bit better for gas today as well. So markets generally improving. MBP, we see here, again, not a great surprise. Got a little upside target there kicking in. The downside target's met on the daily. Not yet crossing the cloud, so it's too early to call a recovery in gas, but that's quite key as well. This data all coming from Refinitiv Icon, but if we look at some of the other OTC products, so we look at German Power, this is coming from Montel. So we see here on the daily chart there, really quite key, these downside targets really have been showing on German Power, looking very bearish still. This is the 10-minute chart, which I tend to use. The data a bit less liquid. Really interesting. We've got an upside target there for German Power today, but this downside target is still pretty dominant. So it's pretty hard to be bullish. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. Bye for now.